Very much for letting me have a quick polemic or rant, depending on how you want to see it. So this is moving slightly away from the technical stuff that we've had and a more personal view of speech technology in some respects. Before I go ahead though, I just want to ask a question. And I've often misinterpreted this question because I'm at a certain age where PDA used to mean Palm Pilots to me, and of course it doesn't anymore. How many people use personal digital assistants on a regular basis? Come on, don't be shy. Okay, no, it's all right. No, it's okay. And you can put your hands down if you work at Google or Apple, obviously. But okay. How many use them sort of occasionally? Okay, that's pretty good. And how many use them but don't anymore? Okay. It's interesting because when I was in Dresden, they gave this question, and out of the whole lot, there was quite a small number, and I was a bit shocked because we are a speech community, and I was trying to think about this and work out how this fitted in with everything, because in a way we've seen a renaissance of speech technology and an enormous investment of money and expertise into the area, which is great. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the landscape of speech technology. And particularly talking about delighting the user, which is a strangely controversial concept in speech technology. Wired magazine in 2012 voted speech technology on a telephone as the most hated technology of the 20th century. And still, when I go to HCI conferences, I have to sort of start off with an apology about that. Although it wasn't really my fault. And there's a question of whether delight, has a role in speech technology, and if it does, what sort of position would that have? So I'm going to start by taking us away. This is Edinburgh, and mostly because it's a beautiful part of Scotland. Use this little bit of Scotland up here, West of Ross, as an example of the landscape that I'm interested in. And you must visit, by the way, it's very, very nice. So, there's lots of different elements within speech technology, and often when we're within ASR or TTS, we can often feel it's slightly in a bubble, where we're producing TTS and throwing it over the wall, or doing ASR and reporting our 1.2% increase in our whatever scores. But there's a lot of other areas which kind of are our consumers almost within this area. And it's quite interesting when you look at how we relate to these other areas. So within the status quo, I think it's interesting to see how things have developed and how people feel about these, because I think it affects our work in some respects. So first of all, I would say that there's a big problem with human-computer interaction. I first noticed this, I went to Mobile HCI in 2010, and I thought, brilliant, everyone will want to talk to me because I do speech technology and they do mobile. No, they really didn't. And actually they gave a talk, Patrick Bodice gave a talk on the new small. This was, devices the size of a euro coin. And he didn't mention speech technology at any point in his talk. And later on I looked at this and discovered actually this is quite prevalent in the HCI community. I think it's changing now, mostly because of big commercial interest, but there was generally a tendency to say, oh well, it's not really mature yet. Ben Schneidman showed it was rubbish in 2000. Had started a lot of problems about it in 2000. So come back to us when it's good. And of course, to a certain extent, if you took this to other types of HCI, if they said, hey, well, we're just not going to worry about graphics because we haven't got we haven't got million VGA yet. So let's just leave it to the green screens and the terminal until we get there. And of course, that's not how you do it. In design, it's important to develop the technology when it's not mature. That's the whole point. So we know how to use it. And of course, that's made even worse by that, which is that within the HCI community, when they do look at speech technology, that's what they think of. And that, it's changed, honestly, but that is a problem. Furthermore, from a commercial perspective, the market is IVR mostly. It's changed again, but certainly over the last 10 years it's changed very dramatically in some respects. But it's still the case that mostly we're producing systems for phone systems which are basically put in place so they can fire people and save money, right? And there's not a big incentive to get too delightful about that. I mean, to a large extent, maybe that's also reasonable. I mean, when someone, if you ring up a bank for your bank balance, you don't necessarily want it to say it in a happy voice if you've got a lot of money, and a sad voice if you've not got much money. So to a certain extent, there's arguments that maybe it's not so relevant. And then finally, if you work in the business sector, which I do, there really is absolutely no understanding of technology once you get into a business area. I mean, you know, one of the typical things, and I guess people in ASR will know this. You're in a company doing your ASR, and then the company says, "Right, can you do a TTS system?" They go, "We do ASR." But it's the same thing, isn't it? I've had the same thing with people asking me to do ASR. I don't know anything about ASR. So it's interesting of how we can deal with this and how we can deal with all these different factors and whether we should. So I think it's important because without the collaboration between the HCI people and the UX people, we can't really move forwards with this technology. We're kind of trapped in a modality where we're using this technology and people don't like it very much. And to a certain extent, if we take a step back, speech synthesis is just like graphics, it's rendering. ASR is just like data analytics, it's building understanding. We need to be able to put these things together in a way which is delightful, where people want to use these interfaces. Now, of course, you could argue that that is happening with all these systems, but I'm not entirely convinced it is. And there's a lot of problems in developing within this. So I'm going to concentrate a bit on speech synthesis, because that's my area, and talk about some of the things that I think are relevant when it comes to delighting the user, rather than maybe producing new systems or publishable work in speech. And it is really difficult because, for the problem really, one of the problems we have is that, speech is really easy for us. So we're working really hard on a technology that any idiot can use as a human being. And they just open their mouths and they produce beautiful speech. We have to work really hard to do that. The second problem is that language has developed over many types of processes. And as such, it's not a clear algorithm. It's not a simple thing of let's, bolt in the algorithm, it will work. There ends up being a load of tricks and tips and hybrids and all sorts of things that we try and use to make these systems work. There is no, in a way there's a kind of a desire to try and make it simple and to say, well, can't we just use a giant DNN with all the audio in the world and then get that to produce a beautiful system at the other end? But it's not clear we can. So, how do we go back to delighting the user? What different features in TTS might be relevant? So, I think the voice matters a lot, and I don't think there's been enough attention to that. The way things sound matter. To a certain extent, that unearthly neutral voice that we use in TTS systems, which were developed for IVR systems, is still the voice we hear a lot in other systems. And if you look at say, science fiction, any science fiction film where you hear the synthetic voice, "Hi, welcome to the base," they're going to kill you, right? It's inevitable. If it's like a kind of cheerful Cockney kind of regional accent, he probably won't kill you. It might not be very dependable, but it'll probably be okay. And within all this, the user experience, and actually even how we measure the user experience, is still really, really difficult. We really haven't developed it sufficiently. So let's take some examples. And these are really simple things to do, but they can make a big difference. So one is just variation, right? Simple variation.
Yes, 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 yes.
That's not variation.
Yes, 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 yes.
That is. That's easy. We can do that. We can build that into our systems, right? That constant sense of it sounding the same and fulfilling this preconceived role of what a synthetic system should be can be altered.
I adore dogs. I adore dogs. I like America. I like America.
we can change emphasis, we can change stress, right? The big problems with these things is we don't know how to do it unless someone actually tells us what their design is. And if the people actually designing the systems never actually talk to the speech technologists until they're finished, none of this stuff is going to be in place. So we have to try and build bridges with the designers so we can put a lot of stuff which isn't that hard to do and make systems a lot better and more delightful. Emotion.
The world is so depressing at the moment. It's all war and bad news. I'd like to say hello to the BBC. I love television and radio. It's all very exciting. It's about time the BBC started listening to the lessons peers. When will they take the task of public broadcasting seriously?
And I sort of feel we're missing a lot of fun. You can have a lot of fun with stuff like that, right? You can publish fun. Fun is actually interesting to people often, and to a certain extent, I mean, this is an ancient talking head. This is, I even forget which one this is. It's not ours. And the lip syncing is terrible, even worse actually over the thing. But it still produces something interesting. And to a large extent, our ability to build these big systems with other people and do interesting stuff with it has been remarkably absent, I think, in our work. It hasn't been published. It's hard to publish it, and that's one of the problems. The HCI community regard it as sort of speech stuff. Into speech, there's a little bit of it. There's loads of IVA, but it tends to be very task-orientated. And all the chatbot stuff, well, those guys are all crazy, so no one wants to get involved with them. And I think we need to kind of change that and try and move forward a bit. I think character is really interesting, and I was talking to Roger earlier, he was talking about appropriateness of voices. I kind of like this example because it's about appropriateness. So this is, everyone know this quote from? Come on, you must know. Jane Austen, come on, you do know, right? I know we're engineers, but still. So it's kind of nice to...
It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife.
That's not too bad, that's good unit selection synthesis, sounds pretty good. But it's kind of not appropriate for Jane Austen, because Jane Austen is very British.
It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of good fortune must be in want of a wife.
Well, that's the Queen. So maybe a little bit too over the top in terms of English. But in contrast, you know, I live in Edinburgh, and we have great relationships with people who live in a city called Glasgow, which is quite close.
It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife.
You can get this voice, by the way, on your Android phone if you want to order a pint in a threatening manner at any point. It's free. On us, right? Very inappropriate. Now I start wondering, how inappropriate can we get?
It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. And
it actually crossed my mind we could actually read out all of Jane Austen's books, the complete works with George Bush, and sell them and see who would buy them as a matter of interest, because it certainly gives a different twist to that sort of sense. And then the final one, you know, could it get any worse?
It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife.
So character makes a lot of difference. And we should be working more on it. The second element, I think, is flexibility. And this, again, works more when you're doing design with designers. A lot of the applications that people are building don't have much dynamic content in them at all. In fact, mostly you know that because they never use our engineering at all. They just record prompts, and then they just keep adding prompts to it. And if you look in the game environment, they're quite happy to record, you know, 500,000 prompts for their games. You sort of feel that we must be able to help somehow with some of this. So this is the example of flexibility where you try and mix. This is an example of mixing pre-recorded prompts with synthesis, though tricky to get a grant on this when you say, what I want to do is learn how to splice speech together, because we all used to know what that sounded like. So this is an example of using...
I gather I have to tell you something about myself. My name is Roger. I run the local neighborhood watch. This is something which I really dislike. I live in Southend-on-Sea, which is a bit awkward. I don't have many interests, but mowing the lawn is an obsession of mine.
So you can get really, really good naturalness if you know what you're going to say in advance. Obviously, you just record it. But you can use synthesis to work with that in different... It's not just all or nothing. You can have a spectrum. So it's kind of interesting to think about that. Now, arguably, maybe this isn't the point. And again, interesting, I was very interested, the guy from Microsoft came to talk about PDAs, and it was really interesting. He was a really, really nice guy as well. He was very helpful and asked him for some slides and stuff. But his main view of PDAs was that we have them because they're useful and people want them. And I'm not sure that's entirely true. To me, the most important consideration when Google first took Siri out of the box was you could ask it how high Everest was and not see any ads at all, right? That's the entire business model of Google. By using speech technology, you can bypass the whole thing. Now, you think of Amazon Echo, and you ask it for the new Beyonce single, it's going to get it from Amazon, isn't it? Not from iTunes. So to a large extent, I believe that the big commercial focus on speech technology is actually more driven by the desire to capture that channel to the user. And it's not entirely clear that actually there's any delight involved in using these systems yet. I think that's not completely clear. Now, of course, to a certain extent, as giant commercial behemoths, you're happy to fight this out, whether there is any delight or not. But I think we need more delight in there. And we're in a good position because there is this commercial driver behind the technology. So if we start to build systems which are fun, which people like to use, then we have now this enormous infrastructure to see some real development. And then I feel that, our synthesis people can join with our SR people, move into the wild lands of auditory interfaces, join up with our natural language processing brothers and take over the HCI community, and finally move on the City of Commerce and become completely dominant. And I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.